Hello there. We're actually coming round to this one a little bit late, but this is sort of around the time of year that tend to hibernate the various cars that do not get used in the winter within the family. Today we're actually focusing on my mum's Astra G. No, hang on a minute. Yes, Astra G. Yes, it is an Astra G. On the Astra G Bertone, or Bertone, however you want to pronounce it, convertible. Um, I actually quite like this vehicle. You may not have gathered, I'm quite a fan of General Motors products, and this particular vehicle is quite a pretty little car. It's the 1.8 litre, so it's performance-wise, it's no ball of fire, but no slouch either. It's more than acceptable, and to drive, surprisingly acceptable. So the car itself lives at my mum's house and tends to live outside most of the year. During the winter months, we tend to cover it with a Storm Force car cover, and I will come on in a bit as to some of the problems that can actually cause. One of the first things that I like to do, because it's been sat for a while, is to just clear the scuttle area of the leaves that you saw. I also like to attack the interior. So what I tend to do is, you can see on the seat bolster there is a bit of sort of a light dusting of mould. Seems to be particular to this car, probably due to the fact that it's got the mohair top, which tends to hold moisture. The interior does sort of get quite mouldy. It's actually not as bad as previous years, where it has been literally sort of everything has been covered in mould. So this is actually just a minor dusting. And what I tend to use is these baby wipes. They seem to work very well at getting rid of the mould, and they also sort of do a really good job of cleaning things as well. With the hood, I have used in the past some Autoglim convertible hood care. I didn't actually have any this time round, so that's something I've got to do a little later in the winter, is to treat the hood. But it basically puts a really good sort of layer of, I don't know if it's Teflon or something, a protective layer onto the hood, which causes water whenever it drops onto the hood just to sort of bead off quite nicely. What I'm doing here is I'm also just attacking the door cards, sort of the vinyl, which had small amounts of sort of mould on it. And not shown in this video, but I do actually do both sides. So you do this side first, then do the other side. It's optional if you want to clean the floor to vacuum out. It's a little bit messy in there at the moment, but not terrible. Now the battery had actually died, and usually the window will pop down when you open the door, and then go back up again, and then pop down as you close the door. What I had to do here is you actually have to just sort of carefully hold the glass to sort of tuck it under the hood, and then close the door by hand, sort of at the last point. Just push it home fully, and that allows the glass to pop back in and to maintain the seal. The seal's good enough to keep water out, but it's not, as with all sort of convertibles, I guess, or certainly this particular convertible, it's not the best of seals, so you do still get a bit of moisture sort of collecting in the interior. What we tend to use in the interior is some of those Unibond dehumidifier things. So I've actually got a fresh set of those, and we'll be sort of changing those throughout the winter. Now, what I'm doing here is the hood, because it's obviously been sort of damp and it's been sat for quite a while, has quite a bit of algae on it, and I've found that these baby wipes do a really good job of cleaning the hood up and removing that sort of ingrained algae. What I will be also doing in a second is popping the boot open and cleaning out some of the leaves that you can see in that sort of boot shut area. I clean out the worst of them by hand, and then I use a hose just to basically sort of get rid of the worst. If the car was actually charged up, I would also close the boot lid and retract the hood slightly, so that the hood cover, which you can see just above the boot lid, will actually open. And then you can actually clean out the areas in there of any sort of leaves, etc. But to be honest, I did that in the summer, and because it's sort of fairly well sealed in that particular point, I don't need to do it again. The next stage is to give the car a wash. Now, the car is already fairly clean, as it gets cleaned on a regular basis. And what I sort of tend to do is what I call a budget polish. It's not the best way to polish, but it works for me. So what I'll do is I'll soak the car first, then using a wash mitt I'll apply some of the polish that I've got, which on this occasion is some Myrrh variation, which I'm just showing the camera here, Myrrh Ultimate Shine Polish. I'll apply that liberally over the car. Don't think I apply it to the hood, but I do apply it liberally to the bodywork of the car. Then I rinse the car off, and then I do a standard wash of the car using a good quality. There's my neighbour saying hello, or my mum's neighbour rather. And then I'll do a good quality, use a good quality sort of shampoo and conditioner just to wash the car. You may actually see a little dog run under. There it goes. There's the little dog. Those people that were walking down, they had the dog off the lead, and it just sort of ran under the car, which is quite amusing. Sort of suddenly notice it's like, oh, there's a dog there. With the washing, I tend to use, on this occasion I use one bucket, but I tend to use a 2-bucket method. So you can sort of rinse the mitt off, and then you don't get any sort of grit or anything else on the car. But because the bodywork was fairly clean to begin with, it was fine for me, in my view, to just use that single mitt. And you can see, as I'm actually sort of washing this, the finish that you do get from sort of doing that simple polish and then the conditioning really sort of does pay dividends. It does sort of come up really well. So that's the wash and wax that I use. It's pretty good actually. It's lasted for quite a while. So it was a good sort of 5 litres worth, and I've still got a little bit left now that I can do the Zafira with, but I do need to get some more. When I've actually washed the car, what I did is I left the doors open for a good couple of hours or so, and that, because it was dry on this particular day when I did it, that just allows the interior to sort of air out, and any moisture that's collected in there, particularly on the back screen and the windscreen, just to sort of dissipate. What I did in the meantime, whilst waiting, was I actually washed my neighbour's car, which is that red Yaris you can see just behind the Astra. It's a 2008 Yaris, and I've got to say I'm very impressed with it. The quality, certainly of underside components, is absolutely fantastic. A lot of cars around sort of the 10-year mark, you see sort of rust attacking suspension components, bolts, etc. But apart from sort of a layer of mud, which was on the inner arches on the rear and at the front, the actual underside was perfect. You could actually still see some of the factory markings on the springs in the rear beam. So that's me just announcing I'm going to wash a car for her. But it certainly sort of allowed me to waste a bit of time whilst waiting for this one to air out. It also gives the paintwork a chance just to dry off before you put the car cover on it. So there I am, opening the boot, the doors, and yeah. The doors themselves seem to hold a lot of water, so it is actually a good idea to open them just to allow them to drain. Now this is what I was on about. This area here on the bonnet seems to have been, at some point, the cover that was on it has held moisture against the bonnet, and it's actually blistered. And that's the problem that I have with car covers, which even though they say they're breathable, they're not 100% breathable. They do hold the moisture against the car. What I'd like to do is to sort of possibly build some kind of sort of basic frame around the car. I was thinking of doing it out of standard sort of drainage pipe with push fittings, and actually draping the cover over that so it doesn't actually make direct contact with the car. What I'm doing here is actually removing the battery. It's 10mm nuts holding on the battery terminals, and a 13mm bolt holding the battery clamp to the battery. I don't think it's actually a standard size because it has been replaced at some point, but this one was a 13 with a corresponding 13mm bolt and nut holding it all together. On GM vehicles, you do actually have this rather nice sheath around the battery, which does sort of protect the battery from the worst of the elements, and does seem to mean that you do get sort of quite good battery life in GM vehicles which do have this sort of battery thing around them. The battery itself is completely flat, to the point where my standard trickle charger would not do anything to it, so I've brought it back to my house and I'll be attacking it with my slightly beefier battery charger, seeing if I can squeeze some life out of it. But I do wonder if it's sort of damaged some of the cells in the battery, so that will be something that we'll need to keep an eye on. Once the battery had been removed, I deemed that the car was actually dry enough to put the cover on. So I retrieved the cover from its storage area and put the cover onto the car itself. Before doing that, I had one of those Unibond dehumidifier things, which I stuck into the driver's footwell. I would recommend, because this is a convertible, putting in at least 2 or 3 of them. I've put 1 in for now, but I would recommend getting 2 or 3 in there, and a selection of the spare discs that you can see here, the tabs they're called. They do work quite well. A lot of people use them for sort of caravans and other associated things. So once the vehicle was covered, that was it for this side of Christmas. So I hope you found this I hope you found this video useful. If you have, don't forget to hit that like button, and also consider subscribing for more upcoming fascinating hobbies. Thank you very much for watching, and have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.